Thank you, Chris. My dear colleagues and friends, a cordial welcome to all of you on behalf of ICOS, International Council of Onomastic Sciences, and its president, Staffan Nyström, who is unfortunately not able to join us today, but he conveys you all his best greetings also. Welcome to this new issue of our lecture series, which has been initiated by our past president, Katalin Resegi, in 2021, in the time of the pandemic, when it was not so easy to meet in person. But it was quite successful, and so it was continued also after the pandemic. And we saw in the meantime quite a number of very interesting presentations and lectures from different fields of onomastics, of all the fields of onomastics covered by our organization, by ICOS, International Council for Onomastic Sciences, which is composed of linguists, of geographers, of cartographers, of historians, of cultural anthropologists, the juridical sciences, and perhaps some more. Today we will focus on toponymy, more specifically on exonyms and the endonym or the endonym-exonym divide, as it was called by Paul Woodman. I think he is present today, and he even called it the great toponymic divide, because it is not only applicable to toponyms, but also to other categories of names, which enable a perspective from within, from the insider perspective, and from without. So also ethnonyms, for instance, are a matter of the endonym-exonym divide. Ethnonyms in the sense of names of ethnic groups and nations. Endonyms in the toponymic sense are usually defined as the names used by the local community, used and accepted by the local community. And exonyms are the names which are used by external communities if they differ from the endonym. Usually also external communities use endonyms because only prominent features and features in the close vicinity of an external group has an exonym. Usually the endonym is used. So endonym is a normal case, so to say, is a normal name, and exonym is rather exceptional. Exonyms indicate familiarity of a community with external geographical features. They emerge or exist quite spontaneously if a disaster happens, for instance, somewhere on the globe. Almost spontaneously, an exonym develops. So it's a natural feature, so to say, natural development. And also exonyms come and go. They are historical phenomena. Some exonyms are outdated already and new exonyms arrive. So exonyms reflect the spatial pattern, I would say, of a certain community, the pattern of relations, of historical, cultural, political relations of a certain community with external communities. Exonyms are, however, also politically sensitive. They can be understood as territorial claims sometimes, or as political nostalgia. In the communist period, they were demonized as expressions of nationalism sometimes. So they are a sensitive issue, politically sensitive issue, and it is not a surprise that with the meetings or sessions of the United Nations group of experts on geographical names in New York, they give always rise to the most heated debates, I would say. If exonyms are on the agenda, the most heated debates develop. Also, the United Nations group of experts has also established for this very reason a working group on exonyms in 2002, and I've been the convener of this working group between 2006 and 2007. And we had workshop-like meetings in this period, and they are continued also with my successor now, with Jorge Watanabe. Ivana Crljenko, our presenter today, was a very active member of this working group from the very beginning. I think she joined almost, if not all, meetings of our working group, and she hosted even one of the meetings in 2015 in Zagreb. And she is really an outstanding member of this working group, I would say, a real expert, a real expert. And she published 2 volumes on Croatian exonyms. I can show them here to you. These are the 2 volumes here. And these volumes contain not only exonyms in current Croatian use, but also historical exonyms and also outdated exonyms in a way. So, and there exists in the meantime also an online edition, digital edition, which has been published in 2019. For 22 years now, Ivana was working at the Lexicographical Institute Miroslav Krleja in Zagreb, and at that time she edited and elaborated these 2 volumes. And now she teaches as an assistant professor at the University of Zadar in Croatia, more precisely in the branch of this university in Gospić, in Lika, in the hinterland of the Croatian coast. And she will present on the standardization of exonyms in Croatia. And we are all very much looking forward to her presentation. May I just ask you, Ivana, to confine your presentation to roughly 45 minutes so that we can still have some discussion afterwards.
Yes.
So thank you, and you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, moderator, my dear colleague, Peter Jordan, for introducing me and providing me with the opportunity to deliver this lecture today. So my lecture will focus on 3 topics, as indicated in the title. The use of exonyms in Croatia, then Croatian projects and publications on exonyms, and I will also provide a brief overview of the beginnings of exonyms in Croatia, as well as, hopefully I will have enough time, a recent example of the treatment of exonyms in the public sphere. So let me begin with the beginnings. So as in many other countries, exonyms have been widely used in Croatia for a long time in newspapers, literature, scholarly publications, maps, and everyday communication. The first exonyms appeared in the first Croatian newspapers at the beginning of the 19th century, actually in 1806. Actually, it was a bilingual Italian-Croatian newspaper, and you can see the cover of it in the upper side of this slide. In those days, exonyms were, of course, very scarce and heavily influenced by other languages, such as Italian and German. In 1823, the first geography textbook featuring exonyms in Croatian language was published. The cover is placed on the bottom side of this slide. At that time, exonyms were written in various forms in newspapers and textbooks because there was still no unified orthography. In the 1830s, the national revival began, along with the first attempts to systematize the language, and these endeavors were not concerned with writing names from foreign languages at all. And when the Croatian language became the official language in 1847, it encouraged the creation of Croatian adopted names. So at the end of the 19th century, the first orthographies appeared, but they only indicated the spelling of exonyms, not their use. And during the 20th century, several orthographies were published, providing more detailed rules on spelling exonyms. However, they all shared a common characteristic, that they did not address the adaptation of toponyms from foreign languages in detail, but only very generally. and they provided a very limited number of examples. In 1887, the first world atlas translated into Croatian was published. It was Kocen's Geographical Atlas for Secondary Schools, which later received numerous editions. Since it was the basic school atlas for a long time, it was the main source of exonyms at the beginning of the 20th century. And the cover of it, you can see it on the bottom of the slide. Since then, many atlases have been published based on currently valid orthographies that serve as a basis for spelling exonyms. And one such orthography, published in 1902, is shown on the slide. However, the problem back then, which remains to these days, actually, is that several orthographies are used simultaneously. Therefore, it is not surprising the different variants of exonyms appear in school atlases, textbooks, and subsequently then in the media and among the public. So, for example, let me show you textbooks used in elementary and secondary schools. Here is an example of 4 7th grade textbooks from different publishers, all of which are approved by our Ministry of Science, Education and Youth, and are currently used in our schools. You can see different forms of place names, such as Paris or Bucharest, Lviv or Lvov or Chisinau, and others, as well as different treatments of exonyms. Sometimes they're in the first place, sometimes in the brackets, as well as inconsistencies registered within the same textbook. You can see in Alpha Publishing House, they have Bucharest in 3 different ways. Comparing the exonyms in 4 secondary school textbooks reveal the same problem. Chinese and Indian place names, as well as Arabic toponyms, appears to cause the authors and then the students the most trouble. For instance, in the textbook published by Školska knjiga, the first column here, Shanghai is written in 3 different ways. So, such a confusing situation is partly the result of limited theoretical knowledge and quite superficial teaching about toponyms in general. Here is what is thought about the spelling and use of toponyms in 2 secondary school textbooks. To summarize these citations, the first textbook encourages students to use the original names on the maps. It also highlights that many toponyms were received in Croatian language through an intermediary language, often in a distorted way. It highlights that the adopted form can be placed in brackets alongside with the original name, and that countries that do not use Latin script have their own Latin transliteration systems, which should be taken into account when, even though we are accustomed to the old names. The second textbook offers an explanation of the translation and transcription of toponyms when making maps. It emphasizes that both systems of transferring letters or pronunciation from one script to a Latin form from their own difficulties, and concludes with the statement that place names should follow the orthographic rules used in the original script by the local community. So that's about all of it that it's taught in the school about toponyms. As I mentioned before, the inconsistencies in the spelling of exonyms are transferred to school and general atlases, and from there to media and the public. In the following few slides, I will show you some examples. Here are examples of different written forms of the country name Mađarska, Hungary, as recorded in different general atlases. You can see spelled with 2 different letters, J. Another example is the toponym Balhaško jezero or Balkaško jezero, Balhaš, and so on. It is very good example of inconsistent written forms. There are even 4 written forms recorded in school atlases. And the last example is the toponym Sveti Toma I Princ, which can be found in 5 forms in general atlases, none of which is completely translated name, Sveti Toma I Princ. As you can see, usually one part of the name is translated, Sveti Toma, and the most confusing is the word principe, princip, and so on, and similar, which actually means the prince. So such a situation is the result of several factors. Some of these variations can be attributed to the fact that writing the adopted names depend on a script of the original name, the time of receiving the name, the degree of familiarity and adaptation in the Croatian language and the intermediary language, making it impossible to create unique rules for all possible cases. Nevertheless, there are some general objections to the existing orthographies and that should be addressed. In my point of view, these remarks are first, the rules for spelling names from foreign languages are too general and imprecise, therefore not sufficiently sensitive to many curiosities that occur in written toponyms. Second, they are incomplete. That it means that they do not recommend rules for all types of geographical objects. For example, you have almost always some examples for settlements, countries, historical provinces, seas, mountains, and rivers, but not examples of names of hills, channels, or geological structures. Then they are exemplified by a small number of largely unambiguous examples, such as Africa or Danube, which are not doubtable in any way. And some of their segments are highly ambiguous. For example, the rule for capitalization in multi-world world names of regions, Western Europe, sometimes it is with capital Z, sometimes Zapadna Europa, or with a small letter Z. Inconsistent writing of exonyms is also the result of the usage of different transcription and transliteration systems. Furthermore, different written forms are the result of unstandardized and often very variable usage of geographical terminology. For example, we can easily find the following toponyms: Banksovi otoci and Banksovo otočje, or Brazilsko visoče and Brazilska visoravan, or Havajski otoci, Havajsko otočje, and Hawaii. With otoci and otočje are actually synonyms, but linguists prefer otoci and geographers otočje. Another dilemma is the vague usage of exonyms and endonyms, although it's quite common to use an adopted name for a geographical object whenever such a name exists. Even in such cases, the original names are frequently used instead. So on the map next to each other, we can sometimes find exonyms for particular geographical objects, while not for the others, even though they could be replaced with exonyms. As mentioned before, inconsistency in the exonym or endonym use is the result of two general linguistic rules, as well as insufficiently elaborated toponymic guidelines for exonyms. Therefore, the selection of exonyms in cartography and lexicography is often very subjective, which means greatly dependent on the author. That is why an international agreement on when to use an adopted name should be respected. According to it, exonyms should be used in receiver language environments if the endonym is composed of a specific and semantically transparent generic word, if the geographical object has close and traditional relations to the community of the receiver language, if the geographical object is historically or currently important for the receiver language community or in general, and if the geographical object extends across language boundaries. In practice, the everyday use of an adapted geographical name largely depends on the type of geographical object. So, for example, exonyms are usually used for all continents and oceans, most seas and countries, many natural regions and historical provinces, some landforms, coastal and undersea relief forms and inland waters, rare settlements, mainly those that are important for the receiver language community. Unclear use also results in different ways of presenting exonyms on maps. So there are three basic ways of exonym presentation on maps in Croatian atlases. First one, endonym and exonym in brackets, which is the most common in both school atlases and in general atlases. Then only endonyms, usually found in general and atlases, and only exonyms, typical for school atlases, which is quite considerable regarding the pupils' age and their former knowledge of toponyms. So here are some examples of all three ways of presenting toponyms. You can see exonyms and endonyms in brackets. For example, Beirut, Damask, Venezia, and Trieste are the examples here. Only exonyms, as shown with Temišvar, Zapadna Australia, Sjeverni Teritorij, or only endonyms in the lower side of the slide. Despite the apparent inconsistencies, the spelling and use of exonyms have not been addressed systematically and comprehensively within the linguistic and other fields community until recently. Scientists who may be interested in exonyms have not paid sufficient or much attention to them so far, despite being aware of the exonyms are used daily and widely. They're also aware of the fact that exonyms can be quite challenging, as I showed you before, both in their writing because of the problems of multiple exonyms, or in their use because of the uncertainty of using an exonym or an endonym. But this fact has not motivated them enough to study exonyms systematically. They probably assume that problems could be solved simply by implementing very general orthographic rules. One of the reasons for the limited interest in exonym studies was the lack of a comprehensive list of exonyms, which would serve as the basis for standardization. And this list was compiled only recently in 2020. However, some geographical names, country names, and names of dependent territories were standardized prior to 2019. The official authorities set their own official forms of names. So Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs published the list of official country names in 1996. And the Croatian National Bank published the list of country names and names of dependent territories in 1994. In the first booklet, it was clearly stated that the forms of names listed in there should only be used for official diplomatic purposes, and were therefore not obligatory for unofficial, general, or public use. Thus, the problem of using the quote-unquote correct or at least recommended forms of unofficial country names and names of dependent territories remains. However, in the past 12 years, the first steps in this field have been taken within the scope of two projects. We have made some significant progress. We have compiled a list of exonyms found in about 40 older and recent sources. We offered recommendations for writing individual exonyms. We compared the exonymization process in Croatian and Slovenian in the framework of a bilateral project. We published manuals and papers on the topic, as well as disseminated our findings in the different occasions, mostly at scientific and professional conferences and workshops. And we have also established a National Commission for Standardization of Geographical Names in 2019 and submitted a proposal for the Croatian project that should draw up guidelines for the standardization of exonyms and recommend standardized exonyms in Croatia, since they have not been standardized yet. So let me introduce you to all these activities and projects in more detail. Peter already showed them. In physically, I will now tell you something about them. The basic idea that is inspired further activities related to exonyms is that some exonyms are widely used in more than one variant, and this derives many inconsistencies and confusions in their use. So people tend to avoid using exonyms and instead use endonyms. Therefore, my former institute, Miroslav Krleža Institute of Lexicography, which serves as an umbrella institution for encyclopedic and lexicographic production in Croatia, conducted a lexicographic project, the Dictionary of Foreign Geographical Names, from 2013 to 2020. The primary objective of the project was to establish a scientifically and lexicographically based framework for recommended exonyms of their written variants, not their usage, to facilitate further standardization. More generally, the project aimed to help and encourage people to use linguistically correct forms of exonyms in public by eliminating or at least reducing current inconsistencies. The project also aimed at raising awareness of the long tradition of adopting exonyms in Croatian language. Ultimately, it hoped that this work will provide a solid foundation for various linguistic, geographical, historical, cartographic, and interdisciplinary studies on exonyms. I should emphasize that the intention was not to suggest when or in which situations the exonym should be used. This means that the names recommended in the project's publication should be used only if the exonyms are used. Nevertheless, the conclusion regarding the use of exonyms provided by Ungegan Working Group on Exonym is highlighted in the second volume. For recommending the most suitable forms of names, more than 40 sources have been consulted. The most influential Croatian encyclopedias and the official lists of names have also been reviewed. Exonyms were collected from 25 different sources published in the last 130 years. The list of these sources is here on this slide. I will not read it, of course. Some sources are geographical, such as world atlases and monographies, and some are lexicographical, such as dictionaries, orthographies, reference books, and lexicons. So these are the projects, has three deliverables or results: to print the volumes shown on the slide and the user-friendly website of exonyms. The first volume, Croatian Exonyms 1, Names of Countries, Capitals, and Their Inhabitants, was published in 2016. It includes all country names, names of their capitals and dependent territories, regardless of whether they are exonyms or not. We decided to do that to maintain the totality of categories so that lexicographers and other users can benefit from having all country and capital names in one publication. In official and general use, there is a constant need for proper names of inhabitants, relative adjectives, genitives, and locatives of country names and names of capitals. So they were also included in the book. The book is divided into 6 parts, and the first part includes introductory chapters. The second part consists of 198 tables listing country names alphabetically, and 198 tables with corresponding capital names, and an equal number of small-scale locational maps. The third part includes one extensive table with the names of 51 dependent territories described in 10 columns. And the fourth part includes 6 maps of continents. The fifth part consists of an index with 472 names mentioned in the book. And the sixth part is a list of reference. So let me just briefly walk you through the main parts now. On this slide, this is an example of Afghanistan. You can see the structure of the tables, which include country names and are divided into the following geographical and lexical attributes or rows: recommended name, genitive, locative, relative adjective, short and full Croatian name in 2 official publications, original short and full name in the official and well-established languages, official short and full name in English, and official short and full name in French, official and well-established languages, alpha codes, name of the inhabitant in male, female, and plural, genitive of the name of the inhabitant, male, female, and plural, and notes. Notes are at the bottom and usually contain the following information: motivation of naming, the origin and history of the Croatian name, short historical data that, of course, that are connected to the name, previous names or renaming, variants in the Croatian language if there are any, differences in official language if there are any, and there are, reasons for recommending the Croatian name, and interesting facts. So on this slide is an example of Kabul. Each name of the capital is described similarly to the country names, of course, with fewer attributes. The third part includes an extensive table with the names of 51 dependent territories, described in columns similar to those for country names, with an additional column indicating an administrative status and location. These are columns 2 and 3. And this is an example of a map displayed in the fourth part of the book. The only names recorded on the map are the recommended Croatian country names and the names of capitals, of course. The second volume, Croatian Exonyms 2, the list of current and historical exonyms, was published in 2018. The book represents recommended exonyms of all types of geographical objects, not only names of countries, capitals, independent territories, but also names of settlements, regions, seas, oceans, continents, rivers, lakes, mountains, coastal relief forms, historical regions, and so on. Together with the selected geographical and lexical attributes, and exonyms were collected from 18 relevant geographical sources, of course, for country names 25, as I've said before, and primarily world atlases published within the last 130 years. So it is structured as a comprehensive table of exonyms comprising around 3,000 recommended current and historical exonyms, along with 8 selected attributes and 2 elaborated in the introductory chapters. These chapters provide detailed explanations of the process for making decisions on recommended forms of exonyms, the reasons for listing both current and historical exonyms, as well as the descriptions of the attributes associated with them. It is essential here to highlight the main reason for listing current and historical exonyms together. It is quite challenging to determine whether the name of an existing geographical object is historical or current. Current names are those widely used today. Some names are surely historical, as they are outdated, obsolete, and have been replaced with new exonyms and endonyms long ago. For example, Jakin for Ancona or Požun for Bratislava. Others are partly outdated even today, such as Carigrad for Istanbul, which is outdated in geographical sources, but is still in use in history and some contemporary linguistic sources. So such names are regarded as waning or disappearing names. Therefore, it's quite appropriate to list them together with all other exonyms and include a brief explanatory note. In this way, all historical names were registered regardless of the type, That is whether they are outdated Croatian names, renamed names, often for historical entities that do not exist anymore, names that occur because of the changes in the system of transferring characters from different scripts, or due to the new trends in contemporary language. The use of each exonym has not been recommended in the book, which means the choice between an exonym and an endonym is left to the user's judgment. So the 8 columns in the extensive tables are adopted geographical name or recommended exonym, original name, the language of the original name, a type of geographical object, subtype of a geographical object, a location of geographical object, and notes. So let me just briefly go through them. First, most of the presented recommended adopted names are contemporary and current ones. The main criterion for recommending names was verification. So the selected names in the first column are almost always the most verified forms. Then the original names, they're written in the Latin script. When the original name is written in the Latin script, we simply copied it. In other cases, in non-Latin scripts such as Chinese, Arabic, or Greek names, we use the transliteration and transcription rules valid for transferring them to the Croatian alphabet. And then the language of the endonym is an official, sometimes widely spoken language, since we do not have standardized names of foreign languages, particularly of those that are geographically distant communities in the Pacific or in the Caribbean. There were some minor issues in choosing the correct one. For example, jezik Swahili or Swahilski jezik, or Tagalog or Tagaloški, Hind and Hinski. So in that regard, we have made some contribution to standardizing the names of languages as well. Then geographical objects were divided into types based on the accepted geographical classification into continents, countries, dependent territories, historical countries, regions, historical provinces, administrative units, settlements, landforms, and so on. And some problems arose while classifying objects into subtype groups such as rivers, lakes, channels, deltas, straits, islands, capes, ranges, mountains, bays, and deserts, and so on. So these problems arose due to the lack of standardization, specifically in the case of the geographical terminology. So sometimes appellatives do not match the subtype. For example, ranges and mountains, which can be translated as mountains. This is a part where it's sometimes something lost in translation. I cannot maybe make a good point, because it would be better if I translated to Croatian, but then you will not understand me. So it was a quite challenging job. And so here are some examples. For example, Cantabrian mountains on the range. We could say Cantabrisko gorje or Visoravan, and so on. So the location of the object was the easier part, since the main groups, ocean, continent, country, and sea, are well defined and obvious. For example, the settlement was located on the continent and in the country, of course, as well as under water landforms in ocean and seas, not the other way around. And the last attribute is note. It refers to the name changes and explains the forms in the first column. It is rather short, not as long as the one in the first volume. It lists data on various variants of exonyms, alternative names, and historical names of contemporary names, as well as vice versa, and endonyms that replace historical exonyms. Here are some examples of the names we mentioned or briefly explained in the notes. For example, Ili, Troy, Brussels, which is for historical Brussels, and so on. At the end of the book, we included a table listing the most frequent appellatives in Croatian, English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian, as we thought it would be helpful information for users. So on this slide, you have a snippet of the table. And finally, the online edition of Croatian exonyms, it is the most appropriate way to display all entries, that is names and attributes. Thus, the third result of the project is an open access, user-friendly website featuring a browser of all recorded exonyms, their geographical and lexical attributes, and additional confirmations of exonyms in 18 or 25 sources, which could not be presented in books due to the limited space, of course. The website was launched in 2020. It comprises about 3,200 geographical names, primarily Croatian exonyms. However, it also contains some endonyms. And as I mentioned earlier, it is due to the aim of preserving the totality of the names of all countries, their capitals, and dependent areas for practical purposes. Nevertheless, endonyms make up a smaller part of the corpus and are specifically marked. Most attributes are added for the country names. They're described with 8 general attributes, allonyms row, 7 additional sources, genitive, locative, relative, adjective, name of the inhabitant, genitive of name of inhabitant, and remarks, which makes 40 attributes in total. The database or table in the website backend is also suitable for adding extra entries, such as exonyms for additional sources or new attributes in the future. But nevertheless, since 2020, the list was refreshed only when significant changes in geographical names occurred. And as far as I know, there are no immediate plans to supplement it with new sources or attributes. So its first page looks like this. It features a basic search engine at the top, an alphabetical search engine on the side, sections on exonyms in general, and on the online edition of Croatian exonyms, instructions for users, a section on applied principles, a list of sources, a section with comments, and more. Here is a structure of country names. As I said before, they're presented with 40 attributes. So here they are. I will not read them, but I would just like to bring your attention to section G, which includes 25 sources that represent a new contribution to the already published books. So the visual presentation of a country name looks like this. This is an example of Sweden. I don't know if you see that, but these are these 40 attributes. Another project that explored exonyms was a 2-year scientific Croatian-Slovene project conducted at the Miroslav Krleja Institute of Lexicography in Croatia and the Anton Melik Geographical Institute in Slovenia. It engaged geographers, linguists, and cartographers from both institutes. The main premise was that Croatian and Slovenian are 2 related Slavic languages, and by comparing a part of the corpus of collected and analyzed exonyms in Slovenian and Croatian, we aimed at to investigate the different influences on the process of exonymization or adaptation in both languages. The aim was also to create a unique typology of exonymization based on the ways, manners, names were adopted in both languages, which could be used for categorizing exonyms in other languages as well. As a result, we developed such a typology, published several papers on the topic, and presented them. So enough about the projects and publications. Now I would like to specify how these results can be used in the future and have already been applied to specific scientific purposes. I think we would all agree that approximately 3,000 collected and attributed exonyms provide an excellent database or corpus for research into various studies. So as a geographer, I conducted a geographical study that, among other things, examined the distribution of Croatian exonyms according to the location of the geographical object they name, using the data collected in the database. This study confirmed the assumption that the closer a geographical object is located to Croatian speakers, the stronger and longer contacts and relations with the communities of that object are, and thus a larger number of Croatian exonyms occur. To generalize, it has been demonstrated that the recipient language community has more exonyms for objects located in neighboring donor language communities than for other distant communities. Let's see how this looks in numbers. This is a chart. The most significant number of geographical objects with Croatian and exonyms is located in Europe, of course, 46.7% of total number, or on continents closer to us, such as Asia, 26.4%, and Africa, 11.7%. Not surprisingly, distant Australia has only 1.3 Croatian exonyms, and South America, 2.2%. Such a distribution is the result of Croatia's location in Europe, that is strong traditional relations with European countries on one hand, and the relative proximity of Asia and Africa on the other. Of course, other factors also are important. For instance, the language of the original names, the time and the type of exonymization process, as well as the lesser familiarity and importance of distant objects, for example, in Australia. Furthermore, I examined the distribution of Croatian exonyms by country using European countries as an example. As shown in this slide, the majority of objects with Croatian exonyms are located in Greece, almost 10% of all recorded locations, followed by Russia, 7.7, Italy, 7.5, and Germany, 7.5. It's obvious that most Croatian exonyms are in countries that are either geographically closer to Croatia, so we share same some of or most parts of our history with them. For example, Italy, Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, or either they are extensive, populous, and today or in the past globally, economically, politically, culturally influential European countries such as Germany, France, Spain, Russia, United Kingdom, Greece, and so on. And they are countries with Slavic languages from which we directly or indirectly created our exonyms, such as Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. Such a distribution confirms the aforementioned conclusions of Jungegen working group on exonyms regarding the use of exonyms. A final topic I want to address is the future of exonym treatment in Croatia. In the future, exonym issues should be primarily addressed through the regular activities of the Commission for the Standardization of Geographical Names. The Commission was established rather late, in March 2019, by the State Geodetic Administration, and some tasks of the Commission are to revise toponyms and, if necessary, establish new ones, then to determine the main principle or guidelines of writing and use of foreign geographical names for educational, scientific, diplomatic, and other purposes, to provide recommendations for the standardization of geographical names in and outside Croatia, to provide recommendations for improving the register of geographical names. The decision of accepting or rejecting the Commission's recommendation is left to the public administration officials, who are, however, strongly encouraged to carry out the standardization process by following the Commission's recommendations. The Commission has prepared and adopted several guidelines so far, including the guidelines for writing and use of geographical names from foreign languages in 2020, which partly addresses exonyms. The next step regarding exonyms would be to standardize exonyms, or at least the most controversial ones. The basis for it will undoubtedly be the Institute's reference books and website. However, this endeavor might be on hold, since the main Commission's preoccupation is providing recommended standardized forms for new or renamed street names. So the Commission rarely receives requests from municipalities or the government for the standardization of exonyms. Exceptions are rather rare cases regarding exonyms incorporated in street and park names. A recent example is the name of park in Pula. The municipality proposed the name Park of the city of Lavov. The Commission was divided between Lavov, a traditional adopted name that is broadly used in the Croatian language and was adopted through the Russian, Czech, or Polish language, and Lviv, a name that is not common in the Croatian language, but according to the spelling rule for the transfer of names from the Ukrainian language, preference is given to the name that was created according to the Ukrainian pronunciation. Finally, the name Lviv was accepted as a show of respect for the struggle of the Ukrainian people for freedom. So Pula has a new name, Park of the city of Lviv. In conclusion, as you can see from this presentation, the major problem with the Croatian exonyms is that they have not yet been standardized, resulting in constant and persistent inconsistencies. This issue is not taken seriously enough in the Croatian scientific and professional community. There are literally a few scholars who research exonyms, and to put it very generally, linguists are not very interested in exonyms, as they are mostly preoccupied with endonyms. Geographers, on the other hand, deal with space and place rather than the names of space and place, at least in Croatia. I'm talking about Croatia. And cartographers are primarily concerned with the technical aspects of toponyms on maps rather than their spelling and use. So therefore, significant progress would be made if the Slovenian-Croatian project, which aims to develop guidelines for the standardization of exonyms and recommends standardized exonyms in Croatia, and is currently undergoing evaluation process, would be approved. So keep your fingers crossed, please, and thank you for your attention. If you have any comments, and if there is enough time, I can answer your questions if you have any, and if I will be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivana, for this excellent presentation on a very comprehensive and very valuable piece of work, I think. Before I open the floor for discussion, let me just ask you a delicate question.
Yes.
How would you classify Jadransko more, a Croatian name for the Adriatic Sea, if it is written in the coastal waters of Italy? How would you, is it an endonym even there, or is it an exonym there? Or how would you classify Dunav, the Croatian name for the Danube, for the river Danube? Is it an endonym also in Hungary and in Slovakia and perhaps also in Austria, or becomes it an exonym in Hungary? How would you classify these two names or in these positions?
Okay, when we put Danube in the maps, in different sections of maps, we put a different name according to the name, to the endonym in the country in which it is. So in Dunarea, Dunav, and so on. It would be in these parts of in Hungary. It would be Hungary name there, and for us it would be. Do you mean from us or from our perspective?
From your perspective, yes. Is Dunav an endonym also in Hungary or just in Croatia? In Serbia, it's also Dunav. In Bulgaria,
yes,
it's also Dunav.
It is
yes.
endonym in Croatia and in Serbia. As it's Dunarea in Romania, or I don't know how it's in Hungary. Sorry.
Duna. In Hungary, it's
yes,
Duna.
Yes. So it's endonym in their countries. Yes.
So Duna is the endonym in Hungary. Duna is the endonym in Hungary, and
yes.
Dunav is an exonym there in Hungary.
Yes. We have. So we would use Duna as a Hungarian endonym there, and it's an exonym, yes, from their point of view.
Yes. So it corresponds to the general view on the endonym.
Yes.
I think Paul Woodman would not agree to this view, because he thinks that if a name is somewhere an endonym, it is everywhere an endonym. So Dunav would be an endonym also in Hungary, also in Austria, also in Slovakia, and also even in Romania. Yes. But it's rather an exceptional view, I would say. Yes. So yes. Yes. He responds in the chat, I think.